BioShock. What powered Rapture? If you've played BioShock 1 or 2, the first thing that comes to mind might be the little sisters, the big daddies, or even Adam. If you've beaten the game, you might even be thinking deeper into the big brain behind Rapture, Andrew Ryan. But this is Grimsdale Gaming, and you can call me Grim. And we will be looking at what powered the city of Rapture. In order to understand the power system for the city of Rapture, we need first to discuss geothermal energy and the geothermal source for the city. Geothermal energy, simply put, is thermal energy generated and stored within the earth. The geothermal source for the city of Rapture is the underwater volcanoes, which you can clearly see in the level Hephaestus, the geothermal power plant. So how can someone take the heat from underwater volcanoes and use it to power a city, you might ask? Well, truth be told, this has never actually been accomplished, let alone for an underwater city the size of Rapture. But we will take a crack at it. This is a video game after all, so we will attempt to go with it, but in the end we will determine whether the theories hold up in practice. Part 1. How does a geothermal power plant produce power? Sources in the description below. No matter which type of geothermal power plant you are describing, the same basis will apply. Some kind of hot water is produced to spin a turbine. There are 3 basic types of geothermal power plants: dry steam plants, flash steam plants, and binary cycle power plants. A dry steam plant will use steam directly from a geothermal reservoir, which is usually naturally formed to drive a generator turbine. A flash steam plant will take high-pressure hot water from deep inside the earth and convert it to steam to drive generator turbines. A binary cycle power plant transfers heat from geothermal hot water to another liquid. The heat causes a second liquid to turn to steam, which is used to drive a generator turbine. All 3 types of power plants include a return line of condensed water back to the geothermal source. I'm not here to discuss the pros and cons of geothermal power, but I will link some sources for those of you that wish to look further into it. Part 2. How is power produced in the city of Rapture? Of the 3 methods I discussed earlier, the most likely method used is binary cycle, as capturing the underwater steam would be difficult to do. Utilizing some kind of underwater heat exchanger with the underwater volcanic steam makes the most sense and seems to be the most practically safe method. Positioning the heat exchanger above the underwater volcano will allow the water within the heat exchanger to be heated and turned into steam to spin the massive turbines. Through natural flow or forced flow with pumping, the water would condense and flow through the return lines back to be cycled through the heat exchanger again. This is the most simplified explanation as to how this system would work under the water. Part 3. How much power would the city of Rapture require? Sources in the description below. While we don't know the exact size of the city of Rapture, we can postulate that this population was around 20,000 people at its height, approximately the equivalent of 14.3 New York City blocks, with an average of 1,400 people per block in New York City. We also know that the people of the underwater city of Rapture live in tall buildings based upon the official artwork depicting the city. Based upon this information, we will assume the population density to be between 100 to 150 per square acre, putting the total area of Rapture between 0.1 and 0.2 square miles. I know this is a highly debatable topic, but I am not going any further with it. Based upon a sample block picked from an interactive map in Manhattan using greater than 6 million kilowatt hours electric annually multiplied by 14.3 blocks, Rapture would require 85,800,000 kilowatt hours annually. Now keep in mind that number is skewed high because of the modern era's more heavy reliance on electricity compared to the years Rapture would have existed in history. Electricity use has increased by a magnitude of 16 since the 1950s. The construction of Rapture was completed in 1951, although it began in 1946, so we can assume this ramp up in electricity use is mostly accurate in regards to Rapture. If we divide the total annual electricity use from earlier by a factor of 16, the scaled down value is equivalent to 5,362,500 kilowatt hours annually. We should probably give this value a range though, so let's assume an error of 25% and add some padding to that number to call it an even 7 million kilowatt hours required per year. Now as far as heating goes for this city, the same geothermal source for power, the underwater volcanoes, was likely used for heating the city and maintaining a comfortable environment. Part 4. Can Rapture's power source meet the demand of the city? Sources in the description below. The first large-scale geothermal plant in the United States, the Geysers, was built in 1960 and was able to produce 11 megawatts, which translated per year to produce 96,360,000 kilowatt hours annually. Based upon the available data and an old historical picture, the power plant had 3 cooling towers and assumedly 3 generators. This puts each of the generators' capability at about 3.667 megawatts, and each of them able to provide 32,120,000 kilowatt hours annually. Now keep in mind, this was the first large-scale geothermal power plant, and it was built in 1960, a full 9 years after Rapture's completion, and a full 14 years after construction had started. If we assume that the great minds constructing Rapture were able to build a geothermal power plant earlier than we did historically, then theoretically, based upon our above data, it could power Rapture, even based upon modern electricity use. 96,360,000 kilowatt hours available for an 11 megawatt plant from 1960 would still have a small margin of unused electricity. Even if we assume that the underwater power plant was less efficient or smaller than the first large-scale geothermal plant built in 1960, there is significant margin above what is required to power the city of Rapture. In fact, it appears that Rapture could have even been built larger without having to add on to their power plant. So in the end, based upon my research, the city of Rapture and BioShock, at least electrically, could have been possible. Thank you for listening, and remember, stay shocked.